Aloha! You're listening to KNKRLP 96.1 FM Kohala. This is Intuitive Talk Story. Welcome. I'm Michál Anna, your host. And with me today, back on the show, is special guest Fasil Bizuneh. Welcome, Fasil.
Thank you for having me.
Fasil is a writer. If you didn't catch last week's show, he's a writer, father, high school teacher, champion distance runner, and spear fisherman, among other things. So we're glad to have him back on the show to get into some fun talks today about some of his work that he's put out into the world. But before we do that, we're just going to take a moment and come together in our breath and just take a moment to ground and be present together so we can really deepen into this information that we explore today. So close your eyes if you're somewhere you can do that, and just breathe deeply into your center, releasing anything from your day, grounding into the center of the earth, digging your roots deep into the earth, being fully present here and now, acknowledging your connection to Source, God at your heart, letting all other things fall away, intending to have an open mind, open heart, heart and mind in coherence, to listen, to share, to connect, to embrace new things and expand into greater realms of consciousness. In gratitude, mahalo. And so it is. Okay, so we just come together today and we'd like to actually explore another one of Fasil's writings and excerpts. This is an audio called The Light. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this before we play it, Fasil?
Yeah, this is basically my father's story and my family's history in a journey from a small town in Ethiopia all the way to something that happened this past February right here in Kohala with my son, who has the same name as my father, Mogus. So it's a story that spans over 70 years and 3 continents, and begins with a 10-year-old named Mogus and ends with a 10-year-old named Mogus.
Okay, so that gives you a little preface. Let's take a listen and then we'll talk about it.
This is The Light, an audio essay written and read by Fasil Bizuneh. I am 50 feet underwater, alone, a quarter-mile offshore from the Kohala coast of Hawaii Island. The fish on my stringer are bleeding into the current. I can see the faint copper trace dissolve into blue. Something in the water around me is reading the signal. Then the shadow comes. 15 feet of tiger shark, striped and deliberate, materializing from the haze the way large things do underwater, not approaching so much as arriving. She circles once. Her eyes find mine. She stops. I do not turn away. I hold position, eye to eye, and I wait. People who haven't spent years in the ocean read this as confrontation, a near-death experience to recount at dinner parties. But I see a shark almost every dive. The shark is not a metaphor. She is a Tuesday. Hanging there in the blue while she decides what I am, I think about my father. Dr. Mogus Bizuneh, born in Harar, Ethiopia in 1944, the son of a wealthy man who refused to acknowledge him, raised in a shack by his mother. At 10 years old, he left home and traveled 50 miles to find a school, because the town he came from had no school past the 3rd grade, and he had already decided that the ceiling above him was not his ceiling. He's 81 years old now. He's losing his vision. The man who chased light across continents can no longer read his phone. There's a story my father told at every party, every family gathering, every holiday table throughout my childhood in Indianapolis. He told it the way people tell stories that contain them, not to inform, but to return. He was 10 years old, sharing a single rented room with 4 other boys at the school 50 miles from home. They paid $2 a month, pennies, for injera and shurwat twice a day and a place to sleep. When winter came and the days grew shorter, they were offered candles for 25 cents each. One boy refused to pay his share. The other 4 children, including my father, each paid extra and bought the candles themselves. They were 10 years old. They had already learned that the agreement, everyone contributes, everyone benefits, was the only structure that worked. You did not wait for perfect conditions. You filled the gap and moved forward. But the boy who refused to pay used the light the most. He sat closest to the candle. He read the longest. He seemed to believe he was clever. So they took their blankets and built a wall around him. If he would not pay for the light, he would not receive it. But the enclosure had a flaw. They couldn't seal the ceiling. Light leaked through the top and pooled inside his fort, while they shivered in open air. He was warm and illuminated, and because he was 10 years old and hadn't yet learned the cost of certain kinds of cleverness, he began to read aloud, just to let them know. So they sat in the dark, together, and refused to buy light at all.
ብጠፋና ባላቀ ነበር የሚሻለው እንዳንተ አይነት ነፈስ እሺ
The boy had fashioned his own candle from fat and cloth. The smell spread through the neighborhood until neighbors arrived with sticks and taught him a lesson that reason could not. After that, he paid his share. They lit the candle. They all had light. My father told this story laughing, not as a lesson. He never said, "And so you see, the moral is," he told it as a memory that delighted him, that contained something true about how the world works. He laughed at the rancid candle. He laughed at the neighbors. He laughed at the image of 5 10-year-old boys negotiating the economics of shared light. I retold it at his 70th birthday party in Indianapolis. He had forgotten the story entirely. He listened to me tell it and laughed with his whole body, as if though hearing it for the first time. By then it had already passed from him to me so completely that he no longer needed to carry it. My parents fled Ethiopia in 1978. The Derg, the military junta, had marked my father for arrest. He had one night. He left immediately, going into hiding in the countryside. My mother stayed behind with their toddler, Michál, hoping the danger would pass. It didn't. By April of that year, staying meant dying. They walked to Sudan, on foot. They reached a camp, and it was there, in the space between one life and the next, that I was conceived. Not planned, not an accident, but the natural consequence of 2 people who had survived something together and were still choosing to believe in the future. They did not know if they would make it to Frankfurt. They conceived me anyway. They moved forward anyway. They released the outcome anyway. They reached Frankfurt, where I would be born a few months later. My father's brother, Alamayo, was painting a hunger cloth for a German church. That commission financed my parents' flight from Sudan. In 1981, after my first birthday, the White Harvest Church in Indianapolis sponsored our immigration to the United States. My brother rejoined us a year later, after 4 years of separation, held whole by his grandmother, while my parents rebuilt a life on the other side of the world.
United States of America and
My father completed his PhD. He taught anatomy and physiology for 30 years. The architecture of the human body, how systems connect, how structure supports function, how every visible action depends on invisible preparation. He was teaching the same thing in the classroom he had learned in horror. He just had a different language for it by then. Last week, my children's mother called and asked me to take the kids. My daughter, Mary Coco, 12. My son, Mogus Mackay, 10, named for his grandfather. Later that night, she sent me a message. Thank the kids. I didn't know what she meant. I asked them about it in the morning. Mary has been making sea creatures from beads and elastic cord, squids, octopuses, starfish, and selling them to her classmates. Mogus learned to make them too and sells the same item for $20 that his sister sells for $10. He has always understood leverage. When they arrived at their mother's house and found her upset, they didn't ask for an explanation. They came up with a plan. Mary gave Mogus $50, money they had made themselves, at school, with their hands, and sent him out into the rain to find something to ease their mother's pain. He walked to 4 stores. He selected a necklace, her favorite lemonade, and a small jade cat, because their mother loves cats. Mary stayed home and watched her baby half-sibling until the boyfriend came back from work. They left the gifts and a note on the bed and said nothing about it afterward. I did not teach them to do this. I recognized it. I have seen it before, in a cold room in Harar, in a refugee camp in Sudan, in a retirement community in Charlotte where my father can no longer see his grandchildren's faces. My father traveled 50 miles. I descend 50 feet. My children spent $50, not because they were told, but because darkness asked and they answered with what light they had. My father is losing his vision. A window once open is now closing. I cannot fix this. What I can do is keep diving, keep teaching, keep raising Mogus and Mary Coco in the light of what was passed to me. Now it passes forward again, in small unremarkable acts. A necklace, a lemonade, a jade cat left silently on a bed. I'm Fasil Bizuneh. I'm a former U.S. national champion distance runner, Hawaii State spearfishing record holder, futures trader, and teacher at Kohala High School in Kapa'au, Hawaii. I was conceived in a refugee camp in Sudan, born in Frankfurt, and raised in Indianapolis.
Okay. Wow. That 10 minutes went by fast, right? Because that was so engaging of a story. There's a lot of beautiful things that we can talk about in this story. Perseverance is one that first comes up, just of the family and of wanting a better life. And ultimately, it's amazing what we will push towards or what we'll move through as a humanity, as a people, to have something better in our experience. And then when we move in that way, we are in this story getting to witness what that looks like, the next step up as what gets birthed from our perseverance and commitment to expanding into something with more light involved. Fasil, tell us a little more about what you were thinking, what you were feeling, what kind of comes to your mind. Obviously, you know it well, the story, but share with us a little bit about that.
Well, I think there's a recurring theme throughout that story. In the beginning, my father has to leave his mother because there's no school past the 3rd grade, and he has to move away 50 miles to attend school, which is something deep down he would have rather not done. He would have rather stayed with his family and his mother. But in order to achieve the goals that he had for himself, he had to leave. In the same way, later on in the story, in 1978, when my parents had to flee Gondar and their homeland of Ethiopia because of the dictatorship and their lives were under threat, ultimately they would have loved to stay in Ethiopia and not have to go to a refugee camp and then go to Germany and leave their son behind and then come to America and learn a new language or communicate, like have to make, leave all of their friends, everything that they knew. But the Ethiopia that they had grown up in was gone. And I think that's like the fourth dimension is something I've been thinking about. Like sometimes we have experiences in a place and over time that place is gone forever and you can never go back there. You can go back, but because time has passed now, the people are different. You can never have those experiences. You can't go back. And I think sometimes people are searching or they're searching for a time that's gone.
So much so. That's funny you say that, only because yesterday I was on the phone with a client that I do remote phone work with, and I do a lot of multidimensional healing on the phone with folks, and this specific person was dealing with going back in the past and lamenting and reminiscing, and it kept this person going back to an abusive situation because they're thinking about the person. Well, when we first met and when we did this and this was so they're my soulmate, they're my this, they're my that. And it's a fantasy because that time is gone. Like you said, it's no longer. It has passed and things have changed. We have to go to what it is now. What is the experience now? And also we can honor, though, like your parents, of course, loved the Ethiopia they lived in. They can honor the experiences they had, take them with them in their heart, so to speak, right? And then pass them forward as we experience in the peace. But we can't live in this framework of that which has been. That's, what do they say? I used to be sit on the floor until you sweep them away. So used to be's are a whole thing. Well, it used to be, but we used to, but that's no longer. It's no longer alive. And that will often get us in trouble, living in the past, living in the future of what we think we might be wishing towards, which I can say for myself at times, like I'm going towards that one thing and I'm just going to keep on it. Even that can bring us tunnel vision. So yeah, we got to explore the unwinding of releasing fantasy and coming into this now moment and seeing everything from where we truly are in the moment. And I think this story, going back to the story, it's really beautiful to see the letting go of those attachments and the ability to move forward, right, at any cost, knowing that's no longer how it is. And so we need to make choices in the here and now that perpetuate the life we want to create, that help support that, I should say.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to consider with any type of growth or change that you're pursuing in your life. It requires a departure. So even, for example, like I'm sitting in this chair here, if I want to go somewhere else, I have to leave this chair.
Right. Yeah.
So there is some discomfort associated with that abandonment or change. And sometimes we can get so comfortable in the place that we are that we don't live intentionally in this moment, or we're constantly in that fantasy, which our memory can be playing tricks on us, and it might not even be the reality of what we had experienced. And longing for that past takes away from the present moment. And then you're not being intentional in this moment, and then you're going to continue to have regret and worry and stress the further away you are from being intentional in the now, because now is where everything is happening. This is the reality.
Absolutely. And even with the client, this is what kind of came up, like, because they were lamenting, then getting mad at themselves around something they had done, and I can't believe I let all these opportunities go, or this or that. I said, well, I've heard this before. Like the last time I've heard this same story, and the time before that, you've said this now over 3 different situations that you've been embarked upon, and that has taken you out of this present moment and missing it yet again. So that's a vicious cycle that we need to break by becoming really present and seeing what the root of that is. And that kind of comes into the thing I like to talk about a lot, which is that's probably coming from a root wound of abandonment or yearning, or now I need to really look at my mother-father's setup. what's involved here that I keep reaching for something. I like to say you can have everything you want, anything you want in life, as long as you don't need it. The second you need it, then, oh, gotcha. Like the second you reach for it, it's a mirage. It disappears. So it's like we're constantly working our own sovereignty meter and our security and feeling filled up. And otherwise we tend to cycle in these kind of like patterns.
Yeah, there's that Buddhist philosophy of non-attachment, which they use a pendulum, and it's this idea like that which we push away like comes towards us, and that which we pull towards us moves away.
Right.
So the whole idea is to not be in a state of yearning or scarcity. And once you begin to live in abundance, as if though there's no worry about being provided for or having provisions, then you will be taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my long life phrases is unattached and amused. It's helped me through many, many, many moments in my journey, and I think living in that way. And you bring up intention, which I love how synchronistic everything is, because these are like conversations I've had this week with folks, and about walking with intention, about how easy it is we're talking about dance. And you know you're going to get to a spin, you're going to do a turn. So you have a couple steps before you're going to do that turn. It's easy to, in something simple like this, to just go, well, I'm going to take the couple steps and then do the turn. And make those couple steps just willy-nilly. Like, oh, well, forget those 2 steps, whatever. They don't really matter. I'm getting to the turn, so I'm getting to. But those 2 steps to the turn can have flair, intention, can be embellished, can have style, can have really step as you mean it. Don't just willy-nilly take those steps to get to the next thing. And so much of what we do is oftentimes that we're just getting to that thing over there. We don't think about how I'm acting or behaving or embodying my way there. And in that we've lost the intentionality. So, and of course, none of us are probably living every single second with intention, but that is the goal, to be completely present in each and everything you're doing, to have full presence and walk it with the intention that is really honoring of each and every moment. And I think that's an amazing practice. Like while you're cleaning your house, anything you're doing out there, it doesn't really matter what it is. Am I being intentional? Am I being with this as I'm sweeping the floor? Am I truly just present here? It doesn't matter if I'm running a marathon or I'm cleaning my house. They're both equally amazing, actually. And if I treat everything in that way, then everything gets to unfold in the way you're talking about. We get to live in the presence, in the magic, in the abundance, regardless of what we're engaging in.
Yeah, because I think so oftentimes people will measure their life upon these next goals or achievements, but in reality, we exist on a plateau the majority of the time, where it seems as if though maybe nothing is happening, but that time spent on the plateau is what leads to the changes that do occur and those events that you reflect upon as being meaningful. But if you really consider, the majority of your life is in this time where it seems nothing is happening, but it is. That's where everything is happening.
Yeah, it really is. And having, worked with a lot of trauma situations, again, back to the client view, and even, times in my own life, because we can like you said, that pendulum swing up and down. As high as you can go then becomes as low as you can go. And often for those who've come out of a real abuse or traumas, I like to share, let's just get to where you're having a good day. You just got up. You didn't do anything of real consequence. You fed yourself good food. You swept the floor. You went to the park. You came home, or you went to work, and then you came home, brushed your teeth, and then you went to bed. Nothing really happened, yet everything happened, because you're just being at peace with just a day, and that not requiring something phantasmal to happen or some big thing to have occurred. Because again, in we talk about the brain and we talk about trauma on the planet, we get really addicted, and it's bringing the black box and all the things. We get addicted to these, like, did you hear? Oh my God. And there's this thing. And it's like really, oh my gosh, this pendulum, back to the pendulum swing of a really heightened experience, and then we have a really low experience. And this really, our brains get addicted to this rise and fall, rise and fall. And this is what actually keeps people in abuse. I mean, the average person will go back to an abusive situation 13 times because of that addiction to the chemistry of the brain rising and falling and going through these moments of just, instead of sitting on the plateau and finding peace on the plateau.
Mm-hmm. There's a concept known as like supernatural. Basically, there's a certain kind of moth that is attracted to certain colorings in the opposite sex, but there are artificial things that exist in nature that attract them, and because of these artificial things that are man-made, like the population of this moth was like decreasing like crazy because they weren't mating, because they were being fooled by a man-made thing. And it's almost like when I think about fast food or children's entertainment, the way that like fast food, like naturally we're drawn towards fat and salt and sugar, which were not very like regularly occurring in the natural world. But the way that they've designed like a Big Mac, for example, it has this certain combination that it's like very addictive and doesn't exist in nature. So people are drawn to that over something natural that they could create, because instinctually, like we're programmed to hoard those things, and they combine it in such a way chemically, which is unnatural, but then is not promoting our own health and vitality. So people are like, there's a reason that they're drawn to it. And I think the way that the FDA maybe classifies obesity, and they make it the responsibility of the average person, like, oh, you need to eat less calories, but really the structures that are set up promote unwellness and dishealth.
Woo. Yeah, that's so good. Again, like that which is, we could kind of like the Lucifer, the evil, or the thing it's always shiny. It doesn't come to you and like, it's not coming to you in like this nasty package. It's very shiny package. It's exciting. It's tantalizing. That's how most deception works. People often think that deception is ugly or, really obvious, but it's not. It comes to you in a lot of trickery. I was even vending yesterday superfoods down at a cool event, and I had sweet potato brownies that I made. They're vegan, gluten-free. I utilized the word vegan, which can also be like a trigger for some folks. It just really means there's no flour in there's no eggs, but the word vegan can mean something else to people. But at any rate, there's no sugar in this. They're maple sweetened. There's no sugar. There's peanut butter. There's sweet potatoes. There's vanilla. And there's gluten-free flours. And this person took a bite and they said, well, I'm not a vegan. I eat meat. I eat other things. And this is I'm like, well, but do you like it? Like, it doesn't matter if you eat other stuff, And they said, well, that's a little earthy for me. Mm-hmm. Like, really? Like, what do you, maybe it's the sweet potato, but because their taste buds have become so acquired to these artificial flavors that they had it almost, when they were speaking it, it sounded like a little like a judgment. Like, it's too earthy for me. Like, that's bad. And that's not a good thing. And it just I kind of internally laugh, no judgment, of course. I love, whatever works for you. You're all on our journey. But I thought conceptually kind of what you're saying. I thought like, wow, it's so interesting how we've been programmed so deeply to put these like, well, I'm into this kind of thing, and I like this better because it's a sweet, and that's kind of weird because it's vegan, or it's deemed as something less than, that's because the artificial thing has been put up on a pedestal, like, don't you want this shiny thing? And then it tricks you. And it's really like this, what I'm offering, it's not about being a quote unquote vegan. It's just that this happens to be good for you and is sweet. But our taste buds can also tell if you eat a lot of sugar, certain things aren't going to taste good to you unless it's got that sugar in it. Mm-hmm. Your taste buds have acquired a different taste.
Yeah, our bodies will adapt to whatever you expose them to. So if it's this super artificially sweetened diet, then you're going to have more receptors for that, and you're going to develop a craving for that because your body has changed, and our bodies are machines that are so adaptable, and whatever stress we put on them, it's going to change to adapt to that. That's, if you don't use it, you lose it. And the other point that I had made when I was talking about children's entertainment, and there's this cartoon that I noticed my children were watching, and it's called One Piece. And I started watching it with them. And the whole thing is like so much stress and anxiety, and the characters are sweating, and they're like going from one disaster to the next, and they're yelling and just sweaty and anxious. And rather than say, don't watch that, I don't want you to watch it, like I started talking to them about this idea of their consciousness, like your consciousness is at a certain level, and you have choices as to what you consume and what you expose yourself to. So it's like food and music and entertainment and art and nature. So you can choose. And the more things that you surround yourself that are vibrating in frequency higher than where you are, then that raises your consciousness. And the more you're exposing yourself to things that are beneath you, that lowers your consciousness. And then I just asked them, like, do you think that this show is raising your consciousness? And they both said no. And then I said, so do you, like, what kind of show would you want to watch? And I started talking to them about this idea of like consuming versus producing, and how all the things in the world that people are using, someone makes them, and like this truck over here, someone drew that and had an idea and created it, or these roads, or that house, or that color of paint. It all starts with somebody's idea, and all the things that people are using were produced by somebody. And if you guys want, you can make the things that you want to watch, or you want to use. And I just was like, had them like think about this idea, and I think that maybe the next time they have a choice or they have free time, maybe they won't pick that show.
That's really beautiful. And, I really love that you, again, I've been teaching kids a long time. I don't have any children of my own, but I've been a teacher a long time, and I ran summer camps a lot. And choice, to me, is one of the fundamental premises that I utilize in camp, is like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I want to teach you to be in charge of yourself and give you choices so that you can navigate that appropriately and figure it out, right? Just like what you were saying. And it's so beautiful because in giving them that choice and getting their minds to think and to kind of ponder on their own, they came to their own revelation of, well, maybe this isn't really what I want to do. I'd rather make some things like it described in the video or in the audio, and be able to make some money and sell some of my wares and create magic and, give a gift to my mom and, and have a whole different experience rather than just consuming this somebody else's creativity, and instead of igniting your own creativity, or things that are actually these days not even that creative. We're just given a lot of programming, like what you just described, the sweaty characters and the anxiousness, which kind of leads back to what you were just saying about the hamburger and being put on to people, obesity, that they need to eat fewer calories when we're giving you these shiny things. It's kind of a dichotomy. I think of the same thing with the trash and the plastic. I tried to help with the plastic situation here in our town. I was actually driving the plastic across the island to try and get it. Someone was trying to create a plastic, turning it, recycling it and shredding it, etc. On the other side, it went under. But what I realized in doing that and trying to create something here was, it's just too big of a problem. Who needs to be doing that are the people manufacturing these plastics to begin with. They're not being accountable for what they put out. Then all of the regular citizens, the people, are now feeling like it's my fault that there's plastic everywhere. And now I feel bad. Now I'm sweating and I'm anxious and I'm having a horrible time because now I think it's my fault that I can't get rid of all this plastic. And what am I supposed to do with it? But really, it's on those that created the problem to begin with. So those that have created the issues need to take responsibility for the issues. And we as people, need to hold others, people accountable for those things, instead of just taking it on. And what that does is perpetuate exactly what you're saying, this kind of sweaty, anxious living. And that's what that cartoon's doing. It's infusing the average people to think that's normal. And that's not normal. That's not what we normally are. That's not our inherent humanity. Which I can say a little more about that, but I want to give you a minute to jump in.
Have you ever heard of this documentary, Seaspiracy, that's on Netflix?
No.
Okay, so in that it talks about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, or where there's all this plastic.
Yes, I'm aware of it.
And
Size of Texas.
the interesting thing is that 90% of that trash is remnants from the fishing industry, the commercial fishing. So it's like nets and long lines, and some of these long lines are 5 miles long that they're trailing with thousands of hooks on them, or they're trolling the bottom of the ocean with these huge apparatuses that are like the size of 3 football fields and just killing all the coral and so much bycatch. They're turtles, whales, dolphins, and by the time that they pull the catch up onto the boat, all of the bycatch is dead already. So they'll throw it back into the ocean, and in this documentary, they go to like these regulatory bodies, like this dolphin safe that puts a little seal onto tuna, and they go to them, and they're like, "Well, how many boats are you actually going onto?" And they start asking specific questions about who funds you, and it turns out that a lot of those organizations are funded by the fishing industry, and their whole directive is to point the blame at consumers, and to now so people are drinking out of these paper straws that are that don't really work, but it's not plastic straws that are killing fish. It's nets, like things that are actually designed to kill fish. And though they actually said that they don't actually put that many people on boats, and sometimes when they put people on boats to check, they get killed. They don't even come back, So
Wow.
And then so you're buying this tuna and you think, oh, dolphin safe, but it's not really, and they're actually killing lots of dolphins. And that's like this documentary goes into it. They're actually going into these offices and they're getting like kicked out, and people are getting uncomfortable. They're walking off camera when they start asking like, who's funding you? And it's like, it's similar to like even in our own government with our Food and Drug Administration, how people will go from policymakers to the regulatory bodies, and they go back and forth, and then so like who's really watching the watchers? It's all a big illusion.
Smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of our government and regulations is definitely that. I watched that's really informative, and I watched a documentary about the squid industry, which in the Atlantic, and we're talking, it was eye-opening. I mean, there's people who are being held hostage on the water.
They're slaves.
They're slaves
Yeah.
on these huge fishing boats, and they are on the water for years.
Yeah.
They never leave. Other small boats come out, get the fish, take it back to wherever. So if you're eating calamari out there, I just would stop, because you're supporting an industry. Unfortunately, it's like unless you're catching it yourself, you're supporting an industry that is literally pillaging the sea. They have no fish zones that they will go into anyway in these incredible places in the Atlantic, and they're pillaging in huge amounts. And then it's also supporting trafficking of human population for these workers, for this catch that they're taking from our seas. It's horrific. It's horrific stuff. And so, yeah, when we get into like, that's a whole show on its own. The regulations, the fishing industries, what people are, the smoke and mirrors, and what we're being told by, pretty much everything. Pretty much everything that you're told has got a spin on it. You kind of have to, my viewpoint is, everything's got some truth in it, but it's your job to find it. It's going to be skewed. If you're seeing it in the mainstream or out in the world in public, there's already been a change in that information. This is off different subject, but there's a movie coming out called Disclosure Day. I have not seen it, but I was listening to some folks talk about how it's already just another plant for a psyop, right? To get people to lean towards one direction, to involve themselves in fear, and back to that sweaty, anxious character. Pretty much that's what everything's trying to do, is make you be that sweaty, anxious character. And it's coming at you in all ways. The cartoon, the plastic, the food, the are we alone? I mean, all of it. And none of that is really the way it is. But there's some truth inside there. We're not alone, but the way they're going to portray it, which I don't know is yet because I haven't seen it, but skewed back to that smoke and mirrors, which brings me to, in general, like, what is our humanity in this? We are often shown that humanity is sweaty and anxious, and well, we're only human, People say that all the time. Well, I'm just a human. And I stop and like, but you're not just a human. Actual, real, angelic humanity is phenomenal. We are inherently what you described of your daughter and son when they stopped and thought about, well, is that expanded? No, it's not. My inherent choice my natural choice is to be expansive, to be in consciousness, to find my own way, to make my own things and to create. That's humanity. Our true humanness is to involve ourselves in great intelligence, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, psychologically. And we have been selling ourselves short because we're shown this anxious, sweaty man. And this is what we all think we're supposed to be. People often say to me, well, I'm such and such an age, so it's to be expected that I'm going to have my back hurting or this hurting, or, well, I don't, but that's because I'm such and such an age. I'm like, that's all bull. Like, it's a lie. You don't have to feel anything at any age. It doesn't make you something. That's a belief that then you put on and then you manifest. So, and as a massage therapist, I hear a lot about people's aches and pains. And, often a lot of it's really in our head, and then, of course, there's things to do. Feed our body, physical things, all the things. But belief is amazing how much that contributes to our experience.
Yeah, and I think that, if you go to the metaphysical cause, if you connect it to physical pain and trauma, it's often unexamined or undealt with emotional trauma that manifests itself as physical trauma.
Yes, totally.
And then the most used phrase in the Bible is do not be afraid, because fear is really, it just takes you down to a lower frequency. And so much of the stuff that is coming at people, the information, is promoting fear and anxiety, which is lowering your frequency, lowering your power, taking away from your ability to have a positive effect on your world and your environment. Even like there's so much propaganda, like this movie Captain Phillips with Tom Hanks about Somali pirates. Have you heard about this?
I haven't.
So all these pirates, it's like in the news all the time, like in off the coast of Somalia. These were actually fishermen, and Chinese boats came in and just overfished and took all the fish. And these people who depended upon the fish to survive had no money. So then they turned to piracy because they had no choice. They were just trying to survive. Mm-hmm. But if you watch that movie, it doesn't talk about that. They're just these evil, like bad Africans, and they have to have military escorts now when they're taking cargo ships through there. And the reason why your stuff is more expensive now is because there's these pirates, and it's because of these Africans are misbehaving.
Right, which contributes to a whole nother misconception about Africa, about African people, about cultures, which just continues to perpetuate hierarchical viewpoints and misinformation.
Yeah, this idea that European colonization came to Africa
and saved the people.
Before that, they were savages,
right.
But there was actually plumbing, city centers, public governance existed in Africa way before it did in Europe.
It was actually how the Europeans got civilized.
Mm-hmm.
The Europeans were the ones that didn't wash themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so
they were throwing their
French
poop
bath
out the window, yeah.
Oh, yeah. People pee and poop in the streets and the cobblestone. I mean, the time of even Aristotle and like these times when Socrates was walking around, it was nasty streets during those times. It was disgusting. People didn't shower. It was the African people who brought civilization to the Europeans. I'm sure you're familiar with Mansa Musa, who was a great African king and was rarely talked about in our history. And that was not that long ago, and in 1300s, where he was the richest man on the planet. And like they were highly civilized. And then actually people went to Ethiopia, went to different places, gathered the Greeks went to Africa to gather that information, that they went back, and then Aristotle, Socrates, whom we all think are the founders of that information, were actually taking from African knowledge that was there long ago. Ethiopia is kind of like the birthplace of the wisdom.
Yeah,
my understanding.
Yeah, and Mansa Musa is a very interesting character. He's the richest man in the world at the time. And he actually exposed like a big flaw in capitalism when he visited Egypt. And the idea of capitalism is that you need to have the majority of the people in poor, like in terrible conditions. And it's like a pyramid in which the only the way that the people can at the top can survive is they're accumulating the wealth upwards to a more narrower and narrower point. And when he traveled through Egypt, he gave everyone gold on the streets, and it almost collapsed their economy because they needed the poverty for their whole hierarchical structure. They needed that.
Absolutely. I mean, even we look at the food pyramid. Look at how many images you're given throughout your life in America to kind of instill that realm of hierarchy. And this is great because this is, to me, the crux of it all. If we are thinking and leaping from duality and from a hierarchical mindset, then, which is really what all this stuff is doing, is getting us to think in that way. And when we think in that way, we're already engaged in the program. I'm already in it, and so I have to discard all of that hierarchical, dualistic thinking, so I can come from a unified perspective, as Mansa Musa was doing there, and realizing there's enough for all of us. And in giving, I then receive more. We all get to receive more as we give, because there's an abundance of everything if we live in the spirit of abundance and in sharing. And that whole other system of top versus the top down system is ingrained in so many places, and I think that's what we're crumbling right now at this state in the game. So many people are awakening to the knowledge that we're all one, and that we are all inherently equal and of value, and everything is here for us. And I think it does take each one of us making recognition of these things, talking about it, sharing, expressing with each other, so we can change those systems.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the credit system in the world right now, like from the top, you look at the central banks and the International Monetary Fund, how they go into countries that are socioeconomically depressed and give them loans to build resources and utilities. And then when they can't pay them, they're like, okay, no, those belong to us.
Yeah, now we'll take you.
Now you owe us rent forever. And then if you look at personal credit, there's more debt in the world than there is money. So it doesn't even make sense, like who does everyone owe the money to?
Yeah. And in a lot of these social programs that are in America to help people, per se, I've worked in the nonprofit sector a long time, and I've realized, those programs are geared to keep people in poverty. So when you're supporting those systems, you have to actually be poor to qualify to receive any help, which doesn't help anyone. So that's why I really chose to work in the private sector. And anyone listening out there who wants to get involved in the private sector of helping people, get in touch, because we've got lots of projects that are helping folks. And really, that's I think what we all need to do is become. We're all fundraisers. We're all nonprofit helpers in creating a better world for each other, and realizing that the more you have, the more you're able to give and to share, and like resources get to flow, like we mentioned on our last show. The resources flow the more we live in a spirit of abundance and recognize our inherent humanity.
Well said. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So another one like that, I was in Alaska, and you talked about the fishing, and I've only been there once, and it is so beautiful. And I also was very sad when I was there, because as I went cruising around, and I went with my Hanai little sister, who's from Hawaii but was living there at the time, and she had become like a dip net fisher, and she's awesome. And we took her and her daughter, went to dip netting. I didn't dip net, I sat on the side, but they were out there, and the waders and dip netting the fish, and Chok people are out there gathering fish. And I was thinking about kind of similar story to what you were talking about Somalian fishermen. But I was thinking, like, wow, like the majority of the salmon are taken by these huge fishing boats, and a small portion is like these people are fishing for their sustenance for their year. Like they live in a place where it's really dark, and then it's really light, and that's their climate is really intense, and they're fishing to actually catch fish for their freezers.
They have a window.
For their entire year, which is similar to what you were describing in Somalia and Somalia, but that's because there's been so much overfishing from these huge boats. They're depleting the natural way for these people, and everywhere you looked in Alaska, you just see the degradation. People are like road construction, and people get paid so much money to work on the highways. People get so much money to work on the fishing boats. A lot of people go up to Alaska to just make money and score. And when the North Pole, there's a place called the North Pole, not the actual North Pole, but the North Pole, I was hearing stories about how in the heyday of oil, we were making, $1,000 in tips a night. Oh my God. And it just felt like a grand pillaging. And when you look around at the beauty and just the majesticness of these mountains in this place, and then the dichotomy, it was just really sad. And it was so clear how much we've degraded places and how deeply we need to open our eyes and make a shift. And that was, I think, in 2018 or 17 that I got to go there. But I was just kind of blown away by it.
Do you know about like the biological process of salmon? It's like super interesting, actually. I used to teach this in my biology class.
Do share.
So many species, almost half species of salmon, what they do is they're born in a very small pond, and they stay there for a few years growing, and it's freshwater. And then they actually go through some change in their body, and they start traveling. They leave that little pond, and they start traveling towards the ocean, and their bodies change on the way to process salt water. And they make it to the ocean, and they stay in the ocean for 3-4 years and grow, and they eat and they grow. And then at some point they stop eating, and then they start going back, and they go back to the very pond which they were born in, and they can remember it from the smell and the different smells coming downstream, and they know where to turn. And you see these videos of salmon like going up waterfalls because they're heading back home. And they've evolved not to eat on the way, because if they don't eat, they can get back there faster, and then they're more likely to reproduce. And it's totally for the greater good of the species, because once they get there and they reproduce, then they die. Wow. Because they haven't eaten. And then their dead bodies feed the babies that are born, and then also on the way they feed the whole stream. As they're going upstream, the animals that live along the side of the stream, they eat them, and the people, the communities. And then the flora around that pond, like the dead bodies, feed it's fertilizer. It's so it's a whole ecosystem. And they have to go back to the same pond, or else the whole balance would be messed up if you really think about like the way it's designed, the way nature has designed it. But now with overfishing and dams
and salmon farms,
reservoirs, and they can't make it back. And then so these ecosystems are kind of dying. And then also the communities that have survived, and then the other species that were their whole sustenance was based on the salmon traveling back upstream, the chains are being broken through unnatural like human development.
Yeah. So I'm just looked here at the time, and we've got about 7 minutes left in our show. It's been gone by so fast, and we do need to get some ads in here too, some sharing. So we're gonna sign off in about 4 minutes here. But gosh, to wrap it up, because there's been so much we've been touching on, and of course we could have Fasil back for another show because this is so much fun. Really humanity first. Like, think about our life-giving systems. What are we each putting our energy towards on a daily basis to create a symbiotic and unified system that cares inherently for all of life? How are we each living our lives? What are we supporting? These are the things we can think about from this, like, how am I contributing to either the degradation of the earth or the flourishing of the planet? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the point of us sitting here today, right, is to think about these things and to expand and grow our own consciousness so that we can be better stewards of what we've been given, which is so very much, and peel away the programs and, just turn off the black box and ask the sky and the earth and the soil and, watch ants. And, we can learn so much by just watching the natural world and learning from it on how it works, just like what you've shared with us. That shows that's a metaphor for so many things, not just the salmon, but this allowing life-giving cycles to be intact. And how am I interrupting that, or how am I helping it to flourish?
Yeah, that's at the end of that lesson, I would ask the students, like, are these salmon does that reflect their desire is to live the happiest, longest life for themselves? Or does it reflect the desire for the continuation of their species? Mm-hmm. And like, what choices would they make if they had different priorities? Like, if a salmon was really interested in living as long and as happy as possible, wouldn't it just stay in the ocean?
Right.
Why would it sacrifice its body and starve itself? But it's for the continuation of the species. And that's instinctually, it's built into them.
And that's kind of simply put, service to self or service to others. Mm-hmm. How am I operating on the planet? And then that gets into, am I working in an artificial or a natural framework, serving the whole, and which we talked about a little earlier, that unified field. So hierarchy doesn't feel natural in that way, although someone would say, well, but things eat one another, but they're still working towards a symbiotic system. Mm-hmm. It's not really hierarchical. They inherently, I think that the lion respects the crab, or there's an inherent respect. There's just a cycle of life, mm-hmm. but there's no better than in that system. It's just what it is. Mm-hmm. And so I think making that differentiation is also important, and walking with our intention. So as we do wrap it up here, we leave you with let each moment be intentional. Think about every decision you're making. What am I putting forth into the planet, into my day? What am I enacting? What am I embodying? What am I creating more of? And walk with that as you move through your day today. Fasil, do you have any parting words?
Oh, no, I just appreciate anyone who took the time to listen, for sharing their time with us, and wish you a beautiful day.
Thank you so much for joining us here on Intuitive Talk Story. We'll see if we can get Fasil back for more fun conversations. And go out there and embark in your best human self, knowing that being human is actually a divine, amazing experience, and that we do have the power to change the world around us by changing ourselves and embodying more unified truth and wisdom in each of our daily actions. So thanks for joining us, and aloha.